So Tethering 101, we're going to be talking about tethering today. How many of you are currently tethering already? Awesome. How many of you have had potentially problems tethering at any given point? Well, so that's kind of the principle. I think that tethering is one of those things that many people would like to do once they learn about it, but not many people know that tethering exists. It's not something, like when you picked up your first camera, tethering wasn't the first thing that you thought about. You know, eventually you thought, how do I get my photos onto my camera? Always, every single time, I'm just joking. So when I'm looking at things, if I look back at photography in general, I used to carry one of these everywhere. Let's see, where are you, little buddy? Where is it? It disappeared on me. I'll grab it in a bit. Oh, here we go. How many of you have had to buy 3, 4, 5 of these? And on top of that, they break and you lose them and there's like no connection. This was the reason I started tethering originally, was because this wasn't always a viable solution for me. And it got expensive having to buy a new one every single time you try to find one. And when you're doing jobs on location, having to just rely on something that is as unstable as this, I mean, anything, my goal is this: I try to minimize as much effort as possible when I'm working on set. This is an extra step in my process that's not always the most efficient. So this is my transition into wanting to figure out how to get my photos from my camera onto a dedicated laptop. Yes? This is a card reader. So this is to read CF cards or SD cards, and you can tell, like, this is my old card reader. It's broken because I take it with me everywhere. I tend to beat on things. It's not that I want to, but it needs to last. When you're traveling, you're throwing this in your bag, you're running around New York City, or you're flying on a plane, this has to last a long time, and oftentimes it doesn't. I mean, the reality, it's made out of circuits and plastic. That's effectively all that's there. So this isn't always the most efficient way to transfer data. By the time I started using these, there were times where the CF cards, the pins would actually close because of the fact that this was destroyed or something happened to this. And me using a CF card that the pins were closed into my Canon, let's say a 5D, 5D2, 5D3, now those pins have been closed. So that's now $1,000 to repair, let's say, just to fix your camera because it started off with the issues with this. I think the more things that you have, the more steps that you need, the more issues that you're potentially going to have with anything. This is one of those for me. These work well for certain people. I'm just clumsy. This is not the best solution for my workflow, and I think a lot of photographers would benefit from learning about other solutions. Tethering has allowed me to do many things on set. Tethering has allowed me to work with my wardrobe stylist better. Tethering has allowed me to work with my stylists, as my hairstylist, my makeup artist, a lot closer, just because they're invested into the process, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So tethering as a whole, for those of you who have not tethered, we'll talk about that. You know what, let's talk about me. I never talk about me, we're gonna do this right now. So I'm a fashion and portrait photographer based in New York City. My name is Jeff Rojas, and my primary body of work is literally just doing that, fashion and photographing regular people. Over the last couple years, I've written 2 books, Photographing Men and Photographing Women, and I've had a chance to travel around the world, either teaching photography, shooting clients, or just working in general and doing my own personal projects that I post online. And it's been a ton of fun. But there have been pieces of my gear that I keep with me all the time, and a tether cable is one of those things that's always in my bag. And if not, then I feel lost. And there isn't much that I can say about that. I mean, I've done many articles on what's in my bag, and I'm sure you guys have seen plenty of those. The one consistent thing I always have in my bag is my tether cable. Things can switch out from assignment to assignment, from project to project. It's one of the things I keep with me at all times. This is not my personal tether cable. Mine's in my bag. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's something I've taken with me everywhere, and they last, forever, as long as you take care of them and you wind them the right way and the rest of it. So, what is tethering? Short, simple, to the point. Tethering gives you the ability to connect your camera to a mobile device or your computer. Why? Well, a multitude of different reasons. It gives you a larger screen to work off of. It gives you the ability to work with your creative team to see images that are not on the back of your camera, not holding the back of your camera up to your team saying, look at this. It gives you the ability to see what your images actually look like. So as an example, how many of you photograph things, look at the back of your camera, import them into something like Lightroom or Capture One, and the images look completely different? Okay? For you as a photographer, that's probably frustrating. When you're shooting commercial sets, more so. Because I have to go back to the, let's say the brand that I'm working with, and if it's a red dress on the back of this camera, because it's a JPEG file that I'm looking at, it's a vibrant red dress. When I go look at that image on a computer and I go back to my house, it's completely different. So my whole color management workflow, which is a separate topic for another day, could be completely off just by going from 1 to 2. And I want my clients to feel that they're vested into the process. They know what the end result's going to look like. Tethering's allowed me to do that as well. Tethering is, it's not just a product, it's almost a lifestyle. It changes the way that you work, the way that you think, the way that you strategize on set. So the first thing is you get a chance to view things on a larger screen. When you're looking at something small, I don't care if you have mirrorless, I don't care if you have a regular 35mm camera, I don't care if you're shooting a crop sensor or shooting phase XF, you're looking at the back of a small screen. When you're looking at the back of a small screen, you can't see details unless you're zooming in. You can't judge colors unless you're zooming in and figuring out what's there, and even then the colors are never accurate. So when I'm looking at things in a larger device, it allows me to see things that I wouldn't have seen on the back of this device, which is infinitely more important when you're working with small details or you want to see if you're in focus. If you want to see exactly what parts of your image are in focus, for example, if I'm shooting medium format, which has a really thin plane of focus, there may be times that I'm completely out of focus on where I want to be in focus, right? Because of how thin that plane of frame, that focus plane is. Those are things I have to think about when I'm working on set. I want to make sure that everything I'm photographing comes out that way. The next thing is collaboration. With my team, I have a chance to work alongside my team to see exactly where they're going, what they're going through, what they're seeing. In prior years, I used to photograph, let's say, a fashion editorial. I used to show the back of my camera on a smaller device. We'd go over, we'd look at the images, judging from the back of the camera. We'd rate the images on the back of the camera because of the fact that on the Canon 5D Mark III, let's say you have a rating system on there. I can say, do you think this image is beautiful? They say yes. So then I'd get emails back from the hairstylist, the makeup artist, the wardrobe stylist independently saying, I thought the makeup was better in this shot. I thought the hair was better in that shot. I thought this was better in that shot based off of the back of the camera. You can't see detail, right? When someone's vested into the process and they get to see something in a larger screen, they can see exactly what's going on. If their hair is completely out of, the hair doesn't look great in that specific shot, we can see that in that specific photograph. If there's wrinkles in the clothing, it gives the wardrobe stylist a chance to go back and either steam any of the wrinkles that they have out or go back into the shot and just fix any errors that they see because they're vested into the process. Now, tethering isn't just using one cable to a computer, right? There's levels of complexity with tethering. I can take this monitor, I can display it the same way that you guys are seeing it here, displayed on different screens, and display it on a second monitor that they can reference off of. This is now my computer screen where I'm looking at the images, and then I can have a multi-viewing system with the client or my team looking from another device, which is awesome because it allows them not to be on my back. Okay? These are things I'm thinking about as a creative. How many times do you want people like hovering over your shoulder to get the shot? It's annoying. It's not comfortable. It's not one of those things that you want to do. It's not productive of what we're doing on set. Real-time proofing. So one of the things I realize is as I'm shooting with my team, I go to my makeup artist and say, are you happy with the shot? She says yes or no. Wardrobe stylist, hairstylist, makeup artist, model, client, whoever, is everybody happy? And when everyone says yes, at that point I rate those images and I can proof right on this system. I can go back to my computer and rate everything that's there. The other options is, and we'll talk about this a little later, but you can have your clients rate things independently off-site. So you can have them use an iPad, sit 100 feet away or up to 150 feet away and be able to do real-time proofing as you're shooting on set. So if you're working with somebody like an art director, they don't have to be hovering over your shoulder, which is a great thing. You don't want people over your shoulder complaining because it gives us anxiety. It's not fun. We didn't do this to be micromanaged. So let somebody else be able to proof the things that they want to elsewhere. Other things. So there have been times that I've started photographing out in the cold, in extreme colds. So if I'm doing a fashion editorial in the middle of Rhode Island, let's say, and we're jumping from van to outside for like a 10-minute shoot, jumping back into the van for heat, it allows the clients to be able to see all the images while still in the comfort of the van, which means that they're happy and they're not angry at me for not getting the job done. So I'm thinking about the other things that it does for me. It's not just a cable to get images on the computer. Again, it's almost a lifestyle. So it changes your workflow completely. More focus on quality. You'll realize that as you're tethering, you tend to shoot less. When you first started shooting, you probably took 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 images. When you start to tether, it's a slower process. The images have to take some time to upload, and now you're more vested into that specific shot. One of the things I realized is I'm not taking 10 shots and then looking. I'm taking a shot, making sure that I'm in focus, the hair's right, the makeup's right, everything's correct before I take that next shot. So it almost brings it back to film days when you took time to think about the next image that you were going to take. You're thinking about things like exposure and color and contrast and focus, everything before you take that next image. Because your client or your subject is looking at your back of your camera every single time. You don't have you can't hide that. You can't hide anything. So you're more in tune to wanting to take the great shot the first time. Okay? Next thing is storing data. Storing data is a big thing when you're working on set. Because if I take an image and I do a whole fashion editorial or commercial shoot just on my camera, I don't have a laptop, I don't have a way to back up the data, what happens to my card? I have one original file. What happens if somebody steals this? What happens if I drop it? What happens if the data corrupts? I have to either do the whole shoot again, but what happens if I'm a wedding photographer and I don't have the chance to do that? That's the only images that they have. I need to back up my data. And the cool thing is when you're shooting tethered, it's allowing you to back up the data somewhere, wherever you decide where it needs to be backed up. That's a process in itself. It's a very, very simple process, but it's something that you should be doing as you're working on set. It's instantly backing up everything that you have. So in addition to having a laptop, what I usually carry with me is an external drive. I keep an external drive attached to my laptop where all those files are stored on. And then I have a redundant copy of everything that I'm photographing at the same time, which is a smart workflow process. You have 2 copies of the same data, God forbid one goes bad. It's redundancy every single time. Those are things that I'm thinking about every single time I'm working on set. At minimum, and we'll talk about this in a bit, tethering is the ability to take your camera and put it to your computer. No more, no less than that. All the tools and all the toys that I have up here are amazing. There's a ton of great tools that you have here, but at minimum, you need one of these in between this and this. Everything else aside from that is surplus. It helps you for some reason, but at minimum, these are the 3 things that you need to get it done. Okay? How many of you are currently shooting crop sensor? Just out of curiosity. 35 millimeter? Mirrorless? Okay? Medium format? Okay, so it's a mixture of different people in the audience within the same context. Regardless of what you use, camera, tether cable, laptop. Okay? 2015, this was my kit that I would travel with, meaning I was going on location, I was doing, let's say, a fashion editorial for. So this is prior to the B1 coming out. So I'm using a D1 with a battery pack back then, right? I have my lenses, my cameras, but if you notice at that bottom left-hand corner, I have a drive and I have my tether cable, okay? You'll look in there and if you notice, there's not one of these. Because this, in the past, has not been the most beneficial for me while I've worked on set. I told you can see this is broken, okay? I try to be as truthful and candid as possible. I do not rely on these because these have failed me more times than I can tell you, and that is not what you want to happen while you're working with clients. You want to look professional, you want to stand there and take images that you can stand behind, but you also want to make sure that you're safe in everything that you photograph. So at minimum, I have my hard drive, my tether cable, my laptop, my camera, my lenses, and the rest of it's pretty much surplus. Okay? Let's move forward. Yes?
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit of a novice here.
That's okay.
Is the tethering possible without wires? Is there
We'll talk about that in a bit. Not a problem. We'll talk about wireless and wired. So at minimum, what you're going to need is a camera, as we discussed. I don't care if you're shooting medium format, 35 millimeter, mirrorless, it doesn't matter. You need a camera. To be a photographer, I don't think this is going to cut it right now. Eventually, whatever you guys want to shoot, right now we need one of these. You need a camera at minimum regardless. Next thing you need is a computer, which we have here. So I don't care if you have a laptop, a desktop, whatever you shoot, you need something that's physically there. After that, you need imaging software. So either using Lightroom or Capture One, you have to have some sort of importing platform to get those images somewhere. Without having some sort of software, the images go nowhere. They have to be imported somewhere. We'll talk about wireless solutions later and using an iPad to transfer the data onto another slot and having it saved somewhere else, but ultimately you need some sort of software in order to take the data somewhere. And then your tether cable or a wireless system. And we'll talk about that. The wireless system that you just requested is right on top of this camera. So that's another alternative for what you have. So as I'm looking at different devices, remember that tether cables are connection specific. USB 2.0, USB 3.0, anything that you have, every camera has a specific connection that it has associated with it. Okay, you can't use the same network cable here, this small little port, on a 5D3 or 5D4. It just doesn't work. They have different connections, so it's camera specific. If you're lucky enough to own two cameras with the same port, great. If you don't, then you need two of them if you have two different bodies and have two different connection types. Things to consider as you're investing into cameras, as you're investing into gear. So if I have a 5D Mark III and I have a 5D Mark IV or 5DS, my cord that fits into 5D Mark III does not fit into the 5D4 or the 5DS. They're different connection ports. So you'd have to invest in two different tether cables. Okay? When we get to the booster later, that's something that we'll discuss on. That is something that can be used universally, but you have to use that as an attachment to the connection port that's camera specific. So if I look at this as a whole, for those of you that don't know what connection types are or what you're using, on the right-hand side we have the 1DX, which is going to be the small, I wish I could just use a small pointer. You know what, I could point at the screen. We have our connection here. And on the left-hand side, we have our multi-connection for the Sony a7R2. Totally different connection ports. You have to use the connection port for your camera. So when you're looking for a tether cable, make sure you're being very camera specific. Okay? By the way, I know this is a lot of theory. We're actually going to replicate all of this in person. I just do the theory first, so at least there's some knowledge prior to actually doing it. So USB 2.0, USB 3.0, completely different. You can use the active extension, which is what we discussed before. I'll show you guys my personal active extension that I have later on how to boost the length of your cord. Because on average, this doesn't necessarily cut it when you're working on certain sets. As an example, so that's my personal camera bag. I'm grabbing my personal tether cable. This is the length of my tether cable. This does not reach across your studio. Okay? So in order for me to take this and extend it, I need a booster, which is what we'll talk about later. So I can extend that line somewhere else. And we'll talk about that momentarily, but just keeping those things in mind. If you're investing in your first tether cable, you need the length that is required by your studio. This is great to shoot things like product if your laptop is on top of something and your camera's right next to it and the connection's that close. When you're working that your laptop is more than 10 feet from you, this is not the most ideal solution. So you need something like a booster cable, okay? So if you're looking for a specific tether cable, you can either go to tethertools.com, and I will also save you time if you guys want to take your phones and just take a screenshot of this. This link is exactly the same. I just try to make it easier for you and create a bit.ly because it's easier than typing that whole thing out. But this is directly to Adorama's site on where every single tether cable they sell is. I see a lot of cell phones out. That's why I'm waiting. And that's literally going to every single tether cable that they have in their system. We're good? Next. This is great. This allows, I'm going to close this for a second before we move forward. This allows me to take this camera, plug it into my camera. I'm not going to use this camera. I'm going to actually grab my 7D Mark II. By the way, how many of you have been in one of my classes before? How many of you know how clumsy I am? We'll talk about this in a bit. This is why I tether, and we'll get to the point of cable management, which is important. You guys have seen me break lights on set. You guys have seen me drop things on set. I'm going to give you guys how to save yourself as a photographer while using all of this, and just be very candid with conversations. 70 Mark II connection port is going to be USB 3. So personal cable pops right in there, right in the side. This now pops into the side of my laptop, if I plug it in the right way. I now just open this up and go to Lightroom. Apparently I can't spell Lightroom. How many of you are using Lightroom? How many of you are using Capture One? Awesome. I'll show you both. It'll be easier that way just so you guys can see what the systems look like. First and foremost, what we're going to do is we're going to start a new catalog. And this is the point I'm going to make prior to moving on. I want to save my data onto an external drive. And to do that, I'm going to grab my external drive. So I'm going to show you guys my actual workflow, not a theoretical. We're going to plug this in here. I just grabbed the wrong side. No one saw that. I told you guys I'm clumsy. Wrong side. Pop that in there. Take it this way and pop this in here. So let's say I'm working with a client on set. This is now my backup drive. Okay? Any photos that I take on here, I want to that drive. I don't want to save it on my laptop. Because what happens if somebody steals my laptop? What happens if my laptop breaks? What happens if something happens? This is why I don't save anything on here. You could. You can have both. I prefer to keep it off for performance of my laptop. We need to get you another camera. I'm just joking. I'm totally joking. You should know at this point from being here how many times I actually make jokes with you guys. Totally teasing. So we're going to start off by going to Finder. And what I wind up doing is just going to the drive itself, right-clicking. My data management's usually this. I put 2017 underscore, what day's today? We're talking about 06/14. And what I want to do is save every single file I take from this session onto that folder. That's my goal, right? I want it to save onto the CF card, and I want it as a backup. As a Nikon shooter, if you don't have a CF card, you want both. Depending on your workflow, you can either have it on your laptop or just keep a second storage device. It depends on what you're trying to do. I know I was teasing before, but there are solutions for everything. We've had this banter before, I'm sure. Okay, File, New Catalog. Then we're going to go ahead and go to our drive, select the folder that we're looking at. I'm going to save as Tether Tools Demo. I'm going to create that. And so here's the point. Right now it says backup log. I'm going to skip this time. It's going to open up a whole new catalog because Lightroom always has to refresh every single time you do something different. It's opening up. Okay. To set tethering in Lightroom, I just updated. Stop this. File. You go to Tether Capture. Prior to doing that, you make sure your camera's on. Okay. Head over to Tether Capture. This is the most important part of this whole process. So just pay attention. Make sure it's on. You'll see this little functioning icon here on the back of your camera. See that little computer mark? That's when you know we're set. The next thing is where these files are going to, which is important when you're tethering. This is one of those things, workflow things that you have to just think about. Right now, where are my files being saved? Users, Jeff Rojas, pictures. I don't want my files to go there. I want my files to go to the external drive. So to do that, I'm going to choose that specific drive. I'm going to head over there, select the demo I'm doing, and choose that file. So now when I take a photograph, those files are headed to the drive itself, not my laptop. So when you asked me before, if you don't do that process, you're just going to have a ton of photos in your pictures folder on your computer, and you're not going to be certain why.
I can't select it as another drive. If I can save it on a laptop, it won't let me
So let's say if you're using Lightroom, just the way that I showed you right now, just select a file where you want it to be sent the same way that I showed you. It doesn't have to be the external drive. It could be a subfolder for where you want.
What won't let me save the folder?
So what you wind up doing is you can run a redundant system to do it second, or you can do like hot folders. There are other backup ways. Like I know for shooting Sony, as an example, Sony doesn't necessarily, all the files don't import directly from Sony directly to Lightroom. So Sony has its own importing software, and it'll save folders in a specific folder. I can hot folder this file into Lightroom and have two separate copies. There's always a backup. When you don't have an easy solution, it's usually a lot more complicated, but there's always a solution. Okay? We can talk about that after class overall, but I think that creating a solution for you it's easy and exhausting the first time. After the first time, it gets easier. So let's just jump into the easy workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and just press OK. I also want to make sure session title, if you're very specific on session title, just make sure that you set your session title accordingly, studio session to what you want. You'll know it's working correctly when at the bottom left-hand corner or your toolbar here, it says EOS 7D Mark II, which is my camera. I know that it's being selected. Okay? From here, if I take a photograph, it's going to show up on my computer as a preview, and it's going to upload directly to my drive. Yes?
And it's also getting automatically saved on the card.
Yes. So it's redundant copy, card and drive. So the reason that I'm avoiding my laptop is for performance purposes. So we know that these computers, Macs, do not have a lot of storage space unless you're paying a premium. So right now I have 756 gigs or whatever it is on this specific drive. For whatever reason, I'm shooting medium format at 500 megabytes of photo. That goes away very quickly. You don't want that. It's anywhere from, usually if I'm doing Capture One and I export it, it's about 500 megabytes for like high-res, TIFF file, large format. You don't want that on your drive. You want it here. And you can see that. Not even to like if I look through here and I go back to be candid again, look at my captures. This is for an IQ or IIQ file for phase 1, for an XF file. Can you read the file for me? 114 megabytes. So if I take 200-300 photographs, my drive starts going quickly. That's why I'm going to this drive. So that's my tethering system for what I do for me. You don't have to go that complex. And even that's super simple. You can just put it onto your drive here, depending on what you want to go through. I just know that if I take, again, I'm not metering. I'm just going to take a photo of, we'll take a photo of this. If I take a photo of literally the drive, it'll pop up. Perfect. This is now saved if I go back to the file structure here. Studio session, here. CR2 file on my drive, not on my laptop, 2 copies. CF card and actually on the hard drive, which is awesome. It was as easy as plugging my camera into my laptop and saying auto tether. It found the camera for me and it processed that way. Well, let's look at this. What happens if that camera breaks and I have to bring a new camera out? Well, first and foremost, is the connection the same? Well, let's look. If I look at the connections, it's USB 3, it's the same one. I'm going to go ahead and turn this one on. I'm going to pull this one out, just so you guys can see more or less how this operates. Keep looking at the toolbar here. It doesn't recognize that it's been pulled out of the system, but I'm going to plug the second one in. Notice how it's resetting. If I take a photograph, let's see what happens. This is the process where people get frustrated. They're like, it's not working. It's just like a computer. If you pull it out and it doesn't work, it's because it crashed. It effectively doesn't recognize because you didn't close it correctly the first time. Ideally, what you're supposed to do is close this out. Notice that it's taking a time to actually process because Lightroom doesn't know what to do. This is why people get frustrated and they're like, tethering is not working. It's not that tethering is not working, it's called user error. That's all it is. Okay? So right off the bat, it finally closed. File, auto import, tether capture, start tether capture. Same thing, same file, make sure it's set to the same place, press OK. What does it say now? Now it's a new camera. Now I should be able to do this. Obviously there's no lens on there, but this is the point. And it's saved onto the same drive, same place, using a different camera. okay? If you're having issues with tethering, it's honestly, I would say 9 out of 10 times user error. So it's going back to the processes. Every single time you increase the length of this to the computer, you're giving yourself another area for error. But if you use the right tools, it'll always work. Usually, it's user error somewhere along the system. Either there's a connection that you didn't put correctly, maybe it's loose, maybe you didn't think about something that's going along the line, or maybe you just closed it and didn't think about it. So just being very cautious of everything that happens on set. Okay? So to go back, I need to close this out. I'm going to go ahead and pull this back out, put that to the side, plug this one back in, right on the back of the camera. It should start connecting to the software itself. Once I press, you can see it here, little camera symbol. Give yourself some time. Yes. Make sure it's nice and plugged. We'll talk about that cable management, I promise. File, tether capture, start tether capture, press OK, and we're back here, which is good. Okay? What happens if I want extra length? This is not the length that I need. I need an extender of some sort. So, as an example, USB 3, active cable, which is my extension. This extends my cable that much further. I feel like a clown. That much further. Okay? So I have a lot more room on set. I have a lot more wiggle room. So let's go ahead and take this and plug it into this side of the USB. So I'm going to close this out. And again, user error. Make sure that you're thinking about unplugging stuff before you start unplugging stuff and how to close things out. I'm going to go ahead and take this out. So this is the part that went into my camera. Plug this into the booster. Plug this directly into my computer. Okay. File. Tether capture. Start tether capture. Same thing. And it still recognized my camera and I have the extra length. There's a problem. I'm clumsy. What happens if I trip over this? It literally pulls right apart, right? Which is not a good thing. The same way that this closed out, if this comes out, if there's an image transferring and I accidentally pull this out, I've corrupted that file. These are things to consider. So there are different tools that you can use to make that connection safe. So as an example, this here protects that connection. Old school way of doing things, back in the day, not my day, back before that day, this is what you used to do. You used to tie these around. My grandfather showed me this one because he did electricity at one point, and you were fine. But this isn't a protected device. This is one of those very insecure devices where you're going to use this, you're pulling cables, this is not the most secure line. You can see that it's putting a lot of tension on the cables. If you want it to last a long time, you need to use other devices that are going to protect that. So this and this are how you make that connection happen. So as an example, we're going to take the short end, we're going to go ahead and use this directly over one side, or the thinner side that we have here. The larger side, we use on the larger side here. Okay? We're going to take these two, we're going to put it together, and we're literally going to twist this in. That's a good way to start being able to have a steady connection. Okay? This is also orange. If your assistant trips over an orange cable, you need to fire your assistant. Gaff tape. But this is a very secure connection now. If you notice, it's harder for me to break that line, which means that I have more security with what I'm trying to do. This allows me to have a secure connection between both lines. Well, let's look at this. What happens when I'm holding this and this cable pops out? No more files. Nothing's happening. This little piece here for cable management is called a jerk stopper. I know it's a jerk stopper. I'm still a 13-year-old, and it still makes me laugh every single time. We're going with that. I'm like, stop it, jerk. Clicks right in. Make sure you give yourself enough slack. Cable's not coming out because you have a secure connection. There's always positives and negatives to this. If you're holding this in your hand and you're holding it securely, you're fine. If you leave this on a chair and you don't have your camera secure and someone kicks over your cable, your camera's going with it. So you want to be very cautious when you're using something like this. This is great to have on a tripod or on a stand or in your hand where it's secure. The second it's not secure, there's that ability, and if you're clumsy like I am, you're going to trip and you're going to fall and you're going to pull this cable out. Okay? You use the jerk stopper. Yes, this is you saw me pull this out my bag. This is my personal one that I always have on the side. You'll watch YouTube videos of me with this, because back in the day, this is what I used to do. I'm like, got it, it's not pulling out now, because this would have a less secure connection. These are things I'm thinking about. This right now, if I went to a client and I'm like, yeah, this is not professional looking whatsoever. Okay, I look like I'm jury rigging everything, and that's not necessarily the most efficient. So the other thing is, you're trying to focus, your cables are in your way, just don't do that. Like, Lauren, how much are these? I see, $16.95. And just so we're clear, I paid retail for this because it saved my life. Okay?
What is it connected to, though?
Just the anchor. Oh, my camera strap on the other side? The little jerk stopper here? Oh, just the rail on the side. Just literally the rail on the side. So it literally clamps in through a little string. That saves one. Two points on my cable. What about the third one? Where's the third one? My laptop. What happens if my idiot intern / assistant accidentally knocks that one out of place? My files aren't going to be backed up and the data is not going to be transferred. So I also want security here. And we'll talk about this in a bit, but there are jerk stoppers you can use on a tether cable directly to your laptop and have several points of extra resistance so you don't pull anything out. Again, these allow you to have a tethering system that is nice and secure and safe. At the end of the day, that's what you want. You want your files to go to your computer, and you don't want to interrupt that connection. Anytime you interrupt that connection, there's a possibility for failure or your files being corrupted. These are things you're thinking about as you're transferring over data. Okay?
Hi.
Yeah.
So the computer is actually just a conduit at this point.
Mm-hmm.
The hard drive is plugged into the computer.
Mm-hmm.
The camera's plugged into the
Yep.
computer. And the computer's just a conduit moving this stuff around.
Correct. So here's the cool part. You asked about wireless before,
Yeah.
and I'll show you how to go ahead and circumnavigate this whole thing. We'll talk about that in a bit.
So why don't you shoot, why do you bother with all these wires if you just do everything, wireless?
Because for me, I prefer, it's depending on your preference and your workflow. So for me as an artist and what I do, I personally like to have I like landlines. I've always been that type of person. The security of having a cable that's going to work, the redundancy of this. The other thing to think about is if you have a wireless system, right, that involves having energy in a battery, which is a total different, if you're okay with energy and battery, that's on you. You can take this with you, but it's another thing that you have to think about charging, depending on your workflow. This lasts 6 to 8 hours, so you're okay. But if you're out there for 12 hours and you don't have a powered solution, you're out of a tether solution. They do have the ability to adapt to other batteries, but now I'm adding to my workflow. Me as an artist and me as a person, I'm a minimalist. This here is my minimalist setup. Cable, camera, laptop. That's from backup. I can totally forget the hard drive and be okay with that, and then take that when let's say I'm shooting, I don't know, across overseas, and I don't want to take a lot of stuff with me. I leave my drives over at the hotel because I want them to be secure. I can transfer everything over to my laptop, get back to my hotel, and transfer the data later. Totally a separate workflow. I'm showing you what I do for redundancy that doesn't involve taking a lot of extra power everywhere. This is a conduit for that. Everything's powered by my laptop or the battery on the camera. This, you need a battery for this. This dies, then you need a separate battery and the battery for the camera, depending on what you want. There's every option is a solution. We all have different solutions for what we have. So, yes?
I'm shooting with a wireless camera.
Yeah.
That's built in.
Hmm?
What is that thing?
So this we'll talk about in a bit, which is a wireless solution, basically replacing the tether cable. So this allows you to tether over to, let's say, an iPad or your computer. And
If you have built-in wireless, you don't need
no, not at all, because you have the ability to have. So their app has a lot more complexity to it than most consumer-grade apps that you have in your phone. So as an example, I have an A6300 in my bag. I also have an A7 II at home. If I use the app on those, it's usually a really, really basic app versus the ability of what I have on there. I can separate things like raw files from JPEGs, things that I cannot do on the app that Sony comes with. So it has more accessibilities that way. We'll talk about that one in a bit. So let's go ahead and move forward to these processes. So cable management, which is what we're discussing now, and for those of you that can actually see what the jerk stopper looks like, this is exactly what it looks like. It goes ahead and clamps directly to where you would clamp your camera strap, and clamps right there. Make sure that you can't pull your cable, so you have a lot. You saw it like I'm actually yanking on it. It's not coming out. Okay, so it has a lot of security that way. The next thing is, if you have a tether table, or you have some sort of platform, you can use a jerk stopper on the tether table to make sure you have a secure connection between your laptop and the cable itself. These are things just to make sure that it's redundant for your processes. You want to make sure that you always have a secure connection for everything that you do. Less secure connection, more corrupted files, more chance for things to fail. Okay? We talked about this. For those of you that can't see it, I'm like looking for it. It's still on the cable. Let's pull this out. So as we look at this, again, you saw the same thing. All I needed to do is unscrew this whole piece, and everything's nice and saved and connected in between. Okay, this is just, it's nice to have that redundancy. There's no tension on any of those cables. I'm not fraying anything. It lasts longer because of that. I don't know what the price is. If you want to be honest, I don't think about prices anymore. All I think about is I have to pay for this. That's it, and I'll think about it later in invoicing. Do this. So we'll talk about wireless tethering. How many of you love modern technology? How many of you hate modern technology? Both. If you hate modern technology, stick with this. If you love modern technology and you want to adapt to the evolving market, wireless is really an option for you. If you like wireless systems, it's a great solution. I'm going to show you the redundant way of creating a wireless setup, and I'm going to show you why this is valuable, rather than just show you why this is valuable. Okay? So here's a platform that you can use. I'm going to go ahead and close out of Lightroom. I'm going to open up Capture One 10. And let's say I'm working on a commercial set. I want my art director to be able to look at the files as I'm shooting without being over my shoulder, because that's annoying. I don't want you ever over my shoulder. You need to go away. Next thing, by the way, Capture One, same thing. New catalog or new session. Location, where do you want the location? Make sure that you're selecting the file. Again, same thing. What I'm going to do is select a new folder, 2017 06 14B, just so we know it's the one for Capture One. Perfect. Choose that one. It's going to create a file structure under that for me. I'm going to type in session. Same thing that I did in Lightroom, just for Capture One. That's it. So now my goal is to tether a camera directly to Capture One. I can sit there and tether my physical camera over to Capture One, or I can create a wireless system in between them, which can be extremely easy or complex depending on what you're trying to build. This is being very, very candid with you guys. So let's look at it this way. I'm working on set, and I don't want my art director to be over my shoulder. I still want to be able to take photographs without having them direct everything I'm doing there, yelling at me, screaming at me, whatever they have to say. I don't want that. I want to avoid that whole conversation. I want to avoid all the little chit-chatter that's happening behind me. I don't like that. So I want to take this, and I want them to have an iPad in their hand so they're able to look and rate things without being next to me. So if they're sitting in a car, they're sitting in an office, they can do that without having to be over my shoulder, which is a great thing. Okay? So if I want to create that system, I'm going to take my iPad. You have to have some sort of software in order to get to this iPad. Okay, that's the first thing to remember. I'm going to show you Capture One's solution using the tether cable, and then I'm going to show you the wireless system using the case here that we have here. Okay, so the first one we're going to go over is using just a tether cable. So just this cable. just this cable here, your iPad, your laptop, and your camera. Okay? This is the only Tether Tools product during this whole thing. That's all we're using. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to plug this into my camera. Okay? Next thing I need to set up is I need to set up a server from, this is to show you the complexity of this. Remember when I told you, I love and hate new technology. When it's easy, I love it. When it's complex, I hate it and it's just annoying. But I'm gonna show you the tedious process here. So we're gonna go ahead and create a wireless network. Let's close this. And it's, so you know how it's easier than I'm saying, but let's go ahead and do this. We're gonna go ahead and create a network. If anybody tells anybody my legal first name, you die. Jeffrey. I blame my mother. Jeff's MacBook Pro, press create. I'm creating a computer-to-computer network. What I'm trying to do is have a conversation between this and this. This has nothing to do with my camera. This has to do with the network between those two things. The next thing that I need to do is have this device reach that one. So I need to put in my password. And we're going to go ahead and open the application. For this case, for Capture One, it's called Capture Pilot. And the next thing I need to do is go to my server list. And before I look at anything, what I need to do is go down here to Capture Pilot, my options. For those of you that don't see Capture Pilot in Capture One, you have to right-click, Add Tool, head over to Capture Pilot. You'll see here. Okay? And we're going to go ahead and start a new image server. Need to put in my password. Apparently I can't type my own password. Perfect. And let's do that. Good. So let's look at the options that we have here so far. Store, back, checking servers. I have no storage solution whatsoever. Let's go ahead and do this. Where are we? Stop image server, folder, we're good there. Mobile pilot. Remember the whole, this is confusing more so than anything. We're gonna get through that now. Start server again, make sure that we're nice and connected. I need to connect to Jeff's MacBook Pro from here. So let's go ahead and connect this to Jeff's MacBook Pro in order to make that connection by going to Settings, General, go to Wi-Fi, make sure that I can see that network. Jeff's MacBook Pro, join anyway. Okay? So I'm connected to this device. That means this and this now have a connection between each other. From here, new image server. Perfect. I now have to go back to the application. It's looking for image servers. Okay? No servers. We're going to go ahead and create one from here. Remember the whole point of this whole argument, which is I hate technology. So many different steps. Where are we? Sessions, export, import, file, view, adjustments, Windows, camera, hot shoe. We'll talk about hot folders in a bit. Why is this not creating a server? Publish to web browser, that's not what I want. Folder, all images, start image server, session. And for whatever reason, I cannot get here. And this is the point of this whole thing. This is extra steps in creating servers that I don't have any experience in whatsoever. So we're going to scrap this, which is too much tedious process. This is why I hate this. Let me show you this solution. I turn this thing on. Okay. It'll show me how much power I have. This one's dead. Let me grab mine. It has power. It takes 30 seconds to create a Wi-Fi connection. I take this. I make sure that we have a secure connection for whatever we have. I need to plug in the correct cable, Notice that it has a USB, so I need to make sure that I have the correct cable specifically for this. The Air remote comes with several different options, which is a great thing. So I take this part out, which is that small little multi-phase connection. I'm using this multi-connection to USB 3 directly into my camera. So let's do this. Plug this in. Take my tether cable out. Switch these two out. Perfect. On the bottom of this case here is a username and password, or sorry, a Wi-Fi network and password. That's already set into my iPad, okay? I go to my iPad. Nobody saw that. I know you all saw it. It's fine. It's only for this iPad, hence why I don't care. Okay? The next thing is to make sure that you have their specific software plugged in, which is Case Remote. Right now it has no connection because I haven't connected to the Wi-Fi network for this. So let's go ahead and go to our settings again. Where are we? Settings, settings. Here we go. I keep clicking it. Okay? Case Air RCD88EA. It's now connected. I should be able to take this, press Case Remote. Right now it does not detect anything because, perfect. Take this, close, reopen. Same thing in the process that we had here. It's detecting the Case Air, press confirm. It's updating as we're doing the class. Lauren, I blame you. It's really updating. I just did this 30 minutes before this class, and it's updating again. So you guys can hold this and pass it around as this is happening. It's updating, so you can hold the hold the iPad, pass it around. This is now connected to that specific iPad. The second I take a photograph, once it's done updating in the next 120 seconds, I'll see whatever I have to photograph here. How much easier was that than creating a whole server? Okay? That whole networking and processing, you have to understand networking to make that happen. I am not a network specialist. I'm a photographer. I want to create art. That is not the most easy solution in the world. This is why I'm telling you I'm not a fan of new technologies unless it's easy. Okay? So once that iPad, how many seconds do we have left? 140? Damn it.
Down to 125.
We're good. I might press, can I just press cancel and do it?
No, once it starts, it will update. Good thing is you'll have great new features. Just launched this week.
I just did that 30 minutes before this class.
You might break it if you did.
I know. Okay, any questions while we're waiting on that so far?
I'm not kidding about the screensaver.
No, I wasn't. Have you guys seen my, I know it's funny. This is literally my screensaver. This is why he's laughing. Work harder. It goes in a minute and goes right to work harder. Because if I'm like on my phone, I'm like, crap, I need to go do what's there. How many more seconds? Lauren?
What's the Lightroom software for your iPad?
So this one specifically is the Tether Tools capture device for this process. I don't use wireless outside of this or Capture One, specifically for my use. Lauren, do you have a way of going directly to Lightroom?
Yes.
Can you show me how, once this thing is done updating?
Sure.
I have 56 seconds left.
There are two ways you can integrate Lightroom. You can use Lightroom Mobile if you're tethered to your computer and then create the connection that Jeff was trying to create with Lightroom Mobile.
Yep.
If you're using Case Air Wireless, you can set up a hot folder in Lightroom or in Capture One to watch the Case Air remote software. All of the images that go into the Case Air remote software will then pull into Lightroom. Case Air remote will run in the background of your Mac or PC device, while Lightroom or Capture One is running in the front. So the images will populate just like they would on a cable tethered session.
Got it. FYI, I have to figure out the networking cable solution for Capture One. This is obviously easier. 6 seconds left. Completed. Firmware is now up to date. Awesome. Let me open it up again. work. Detecting case error, set, click, and as we're doing this, who are these creepy people? I know you guys, that's what I'm saying. Already on my laptop, on my iPad. That's how quick aside from the updating, that's how quick the connection is. I don't have to create networks. I don't have to know about networking. I don't have to create servers. I don't have to do any of that. It works.
Is that on your laptop also? Or?
So right now, this is just my iPad. Has nothing to do with this whole process. This is what I'm using on set. Why is that important? Well, that allows me to save the images that I have somewhere else. Right now, this is looking, I can switch either using JPEG or CR2s. This is my CR2 file uploading. I can see the files as they're happening. So let's say my art director sitting there being a pain in the behind. They can sit there and look at the images that they have, and they can delete files from their end. They can look at files. You can see the information there, the EXIF data. You can rate the files right on the camera. These are all things they can do without being over my back.
I use the lines of the hard drive also.
Nope, it's saved all to this.
Can you put that like view only mode? You don't have to like messing around. Like just to rate it.
You beat them up until they do it and don't touch anything. Don't have them break anything.
That's easy.
Have that conversation. So here's the thing, and I'm joking, but when I have conversations with anyone, let's say if I'm working with a marketing company and I give them this, right? I give them solution. I want them not to touch anything. I'll have the conversation with them. I'll say, this is what you're allowed to do. They're not little kids, they're adults. You know, unless they're they're like delete and they're being blatantly disrespectful, at least I still have it on my CF card. I'm not losing data, right? These are things to consider. The cool thing is that, let me put this away for 2 seconds. The cool thing is that if I'm working on set as well, so let's picture this being,
Which one of this space issues? Something like that?
depends on how much space you have.
Well, I'm saying it's not like
You can choose.
You can,
whether
yeah.
to save the data or not on the application or on the device.
Here's the honest truth. I shoot less because of the fact that I'm tethering, right? I know that they're going to see photos. I don't want to take bad photos. I'm not doing over and over and over again. I'm thinking about the process, I'm processing that, and then they get to see what's there. So when I started this whole conversation off with you slow down that process to take better images, that's part of the mindset here. You're trying to make sure that you're slowing down the process for them to be able to see what's there. It's redundancy at the same time. They can see what focus is like. They can see what the images are like. Notice they're coming in black and white. That's because I have this set to monochrome. Okay, so I can go back to this, and anybody who's been in my class, the reason I do that is just to judge light from the back of the camera. I can see if I do this, scroll up to standard, take that same photograph, hard to fill, I don't really care. Let's pull this out. You know what, we'll delete a photo. I don't really need it. Doesn't really have anything in there that I want. Do this. Perfect. And you'll see it once it's done in color. And that's the cool thing, is that we get a chance to do that, and it doesn't take a ton of networking knowledge. They've made it easy for you to do that. You have all the accessibility that you guys have on set. Let me take this out so I can see what's happening. Open this up. Look back at my album. And you can see the color one that we have here. Pull this back out. So we have a color image because I switched the settings back. I have the redundancy of being able to do that. That's an easy solution. That's an easy sell. That's the case air remote. That's your wireless tethering device. This has 6 to 8 hours of battery life. If that's not enough, you do have the ability to use an external battery power to take this and effectively run this to the system, so this has the extendability for that. So I can take this instead, pop this out. This is probably not a good idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. Remember the whole don't do this while it's working thing? Making sure that I have the connection set to the camera, right? Plug this in here.
what's the real life distance between your transmitter and the wireless to your
Maximum of 150 feet.
what's the real life?
I don't know anybody who goes past 150 feet from the iPad, but it's 150 feet.
I'm saying it's a great application and location. I'm just saying, what's the
It's 150 feet. Is it 150 feet? That's the person who helped.
That's what it says in the spec manual.
She's the person that helped design it. It's 150 feet.
Probably 147.
You can ask Lauren specifically.
You are transferring wireless data.
It's 100.
The things that will affect the performance are the processing speed of the device you're sending to. If you have a
Correct.
very old iPad 1 versus an iPad 12.9
Yeah.
Pro,
Start slowing down.
it will slow down.
Correct.
There are going to be factors of technology that apply, but the wireless range is 100.
Okay. So as an artist, 150 feet. So when I'm looking at stuff, again, battery power, so I can have a battery power. The reason I'm also mentioning that is if you forget this and this doesn't have enough battery life, those are things to consider. This isn't a bad solution whatsoever, but you have to have that consideration.
That's just an internal rechargeable battery.
Yep, that's it. Which is great. It's a great solution if you're not clumsy and forget stuff. If you're clumsy and forget stuff, I would prefer that you have a wired solution because of the whole battery and all the rest of it. If you were backpacking in the middle of nowhere and you had no way to get to a photo store at any given point, I would say bring a wired solution because you have something tangible you can take with you if something happens.
Or if the store's 150 feet away.
If the store is 152 feet away as well. So those are things to consider. I'm going to go back and we're going to look at some of the devices that they have aside from that. I have to remember what's mine and what's not. That's why I keep looking at this. We're going to move this over. We're going to move this way. We've seen this. We've seen this. Everything else is kind of an additional accessory for what they have, right? So we have accessory bars, cold shoe mount. This actually doesn't need to be on your camera. You can set this somewhere else and be okay. This doesn't require any type of hot shoe mount. So again, if it's a cold shoe and you're trying to mount something else, let's say a lav mic for whatever reason, I don't know why, but we can use two different options that we have there. Other options that we have is we can take this whole system, so let's say I'm shooting product photography. I can have my camera set to, I'm going to take this whole system out. FYI, this is usually how I keep my camera, and the sound that you just made is exactly the sound that I make when somebody trips over the cable. Okay. Next thing is just make sure that we have this whole system, lens, this way. I told you guys, I'm super clumsy. I'm giving you guys how to save yourself from ruining things. Anybody who's been on my set, you see how expensive I can be with breaking things. Okay? Pop this out. I'm going to take this out just because of that. Wrong way. Pop this in. Come on. You can do this. Pop this open. Make sure it's nice and tight, right? So if I'm shooting product photography, let's look at it this way. I want this tethered to my laptop. I can take my laptop. I can mount it here. I have two options. I can sit there and tether the same way that we had before. Not 150 feet, don't really have to worry about it, right? No one's going to trip over this. I make sure that this is set. My jerk stopper is still in here, that it's not going to knock out. It's nice and safe and secure. That's what I want, so it can't pull out. Then I can run this to my laptop. I can shoot whatever I want and have the solution here. The other option is they do make little hanging racks, little storage solutions for underneath, so you can put your drive underneath and transfer the data to a more secure option so you can shoot that way. If you like freedom, great. So you can take your laptop, you can do the same thing. I can come back here, take my camera out, as long as I have distance, photograph my subject, look back here to make sure that I have processed this way. Other options is I can tether this to a color reference monitor and have somebody else look at a multi-camera that way. All because of this. This is where you start off in order to get to that complex shoot. Any questions so far? Yeah. Let's move forward. Off. Here's the other cool thing. How many of you don't own an iPad? You own a cell phone? Do you have an iPhone? You use Android? They do have Android apps as well, which is great. So if those of you that aren't Apple users, there are alternatives. They have the Case Air remote for that as well. If you have your phone, you can do the same thing I did with the iPad to your phone. So if you don't want that extra and that extra equipment and you're holding your phone anyway, I can still hand this over to somebody so they're not over my shoulder. Great convenience to have as well. It's a workflow thing. For me, it's not having people over my shoulder asking me questions. I want to be an artist. I don't want to be a networking engineer by any means. That allows me to not have that, or to have a worry-free mindset that way.
Is the app different for the phone as for the iPad?
Same one, same exact one. I have a feeling if I open it, it's going to make me update. Same one, just smaller. And you should be able to rotate it the same way that I did. Where is it? Where is it? I still have images that I can still import and rotate things around, which is great. This is a large enough screen that somebody can see and not look at a tiny, tiny photo and see what's there.
Still bigger than the front of the camera.
Correct. This is definitely bigger than the back of your camera. Unless you really have like a old 4S, this will work. Another option to have. Let's look at this. Look through this. When I'm photographing anything, again, you have the chance to use either your iPad or an iPhone. That's a quick solution. Again, you saw the process of having to figure out, okay, did I set the network? Okay, we set that, got it. We head over to Capture One. Okay, that's what I want.
It always crashes right in the middle of shooting something.
And it's annoying.
Yeah, it's 10 minutes.
It's so annoying. I don't like that. I want things to work the first time. I'm always trying to figure out where the redundancy is in my process. Usually it comes back to just a faulty connection, or you probably closed the software long before it was supposed to be closed. Considerations to have for what you're doing, okay? Any questions whatsoever? I wanted to give this so you guys can play around with the gear, whatever you guys want, so we can see things in action, so you can practice with what's there while you're here. Because I know a lot of this stuff, as you start adding stuff for whatever solutions you have, things to consider. So we talked about wireless, we talked about wired, focus, judging things in regards to what we're photographing here, backing data up for what's there. There's so many different solutions for what you have, but it starts off with a cable. That's literally the process. That's the minimum amount of work that you have, and then everything else is built off of that. Tether Tools as a company creates a ton of different products. They have the T-bar, they have the rest of it. The one thing that I use consistently out of anything is this. And this is the least expensive, well, this is probably the least expensive thing at $16. The cable is the second least expensive thing that I own. But it's also the thing that never leaves my bag. Anybody who's seen a class that I've taught, I always have that little jerk stopper on me all the time. It just makes things convenient. I don't have one on this because the other one's sitting at my house and I haven't mounted it to it, but it will always have one. All considerations to have for whatever you're doing. Tethering is a lifestyle. It changes the way that you have for your workflow. I've been able to not have to worry about save data because that already has the files that we shot today. I can go back, same thing. Difference between Studio Session 1 and I go back and I can see what we did before. Studio Session B, any files that we had in there in this specific session will open. I can also right click for Capture One, show package contents, look at the originals for whatever I have, and I can see what's physically there if I had taken any photos. These are things that I have. That's saved to that drive. I know for you it's a little more difficult because you're shooting Nikon and the rest of it. There's always a solution for what you have. You just have to be practical with your expectations. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's more difficult. As an example, I know that Sony users in the past have had to use a hot shoe folder on the back end in order to create a hot shoe folder in Lightroom. So as an example, because this is a tethering class, it's still at the end more practical. I'm gonna right click this, I'm gonna quit. And so let's look at it this way. This has been my solution for shooting cameras that don't have CF cards. And if you wanted to back them up, figure we have the time now, I'll do it now. Open. Okay. What you want to do, File, auto import settings, subfolder name. What you want to do is make sure that you're importing. So let's say right now I'm using Sony software. Let's see if I actually still have it saved here. Sony remote camera control. Here we go. So when you're tethered through Sony, Sony makes you go through this capture control. That's okay? And this is how they look at data. So another option for tethering. I'm shooting let's say my A6300. I want to take photos. Lightroom doesn't have a plugin for, let's say, the A6300. Great. So what I need to do is make sure a Sony, you know what, I actually have one here. Let's try to make this happen as it's happening instead of theoretics. If I have a cable for it, it'll be awesome. If I don't, it's not going to happen. That's for that. Nope, I don't think I have a Sony specific cable. We'll just go with theoretics instead. Sony again, remote camera control. Notice it says save in and it says users Jeff Rojas. What I want to do is I want to save the files somewhere, either on the external drive, so I can create a folder on that external drive to say every camera, every photo that I take gets saved onto that drive, okay? And you're using Lightroom to do this. So press OK, that's fine. I can choose a specific file that I want to save all the files in. So desktop, new folder, for, I'm just going to type for this, press OK, create, open. As I'm using the Sony software with the Sony camera plugged in, this is exactly what I'm talking about, it failing. You see how the software fails. This goes back to the whole process of that. The extra steps that you have to take have errors within it, so you have to be cautious with how you set things up. It's going to get, I wanted to reference that specific file. So we're going to go back, we go here, we're going to go to desktop, press OK, and I want to access for this, press open. It failed again, reopen. Do you see why I don't like using other software? Sony's great as a platform. They're not a software company. That's not what they're good at. They're good at making products, not software. This is the process that we're going through. This connects there. This is now saving to that specific drive. What you wind up doing is going to Lightroom, File. You head over to Auto Import Settings. Then you choose the file that you want to select, which is the file you're saving to the external drive, that file that you had. So that would be for this. Choose. Then where do you want to go ahead and move to? And then you select the new file that you have so you can import it onto the catalog and make sure that they're not getting deleted or replaced.
So we have a catalog on laptop and on the
Correct. Do you see how many extra steps that are there? This is the processes that why it's very, very difficult to have products that don't have that. Alternative, and that's a software issue. That's fundamentally all that is. It's not a product issue. You know, if you have a Tether cable, that's working. It happens to be that the software and the camera and the computer compatibility is off.
There's a couple of third-party softwares that YouTube and RAM and stuff. So,
Well, your other option is Capture One. So as an example with Capture One, you can choose to, in Capture One, create recipes within Capture One for Capture One to duplicate all the Sony or all the Nikon files that you have somewhere else. There's so many other ways of doing it. Capture One's your alternative to using things like that.
I don't want to use Capture. I wouldn't just
Correct.
use this to
Correct.
file.
And that's a software issue. That's fundamentally a camera software issue. And this is why people get frustrated. They're like, tethering's
What
above
I'm
me.
doing is like ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
I'll shoot maybe if I'm doing photography, I'll shoot like 10 or 12 frames, and then I'll pop it on the drive.
Correct.
Stop. I mean, it's very
Correct.
time-consuming, but
Correct.
it's there. I want to have it in two places.
So what I would recommend doing for you is I would find Nikon software, the equivalent of importing software, using a Tether cable, using that software to create a folder, referencing that folder from Lightroom, making sure that it's saving onto a second drive somewhere, and now you have a redundant copy. This is where the flaw is. This isn't a product issue. This is now a software issue. If Lightroom crashes or something happens, or a file doesn't get referenced, and it gets miscategorized or miscatalogued, now you have a fundamental flaw in your system. This has happened to me before. When I tried to use this system as a whole, this is me being very frank, very open and honest and candid. I had the A7 II. You saw the work that I had to do with the software. That's annoying. So I had to start practicing with Capture One more because of the fact that Lightroom didn't have, at the time I was using it, software that was compatible with this. Not a product issue, but a fundamental software issue that affects my workflow, which is not a good issue to have. So I would leave this and put this down and pick up, let's say, this, because this automatically worked with that, and I didn't have to think about it. As a user, you want the easiest solution for you. You don't want, again, you saw the issue like having to create a cert. I don't want to do that. That is not my forte. I want to take pictures and make sure they're saved somewhere. That's all I want. So I'm giving you solutions for that. With you, it's an extra step. But with an extra step comes the possibility for something failing. Just having that open, honest conversation and being realistic with your expectations. how about shooting the day, making sure those files are copied immediately after the shoot? That could be something else you could wind up doing at the end of the day. But then you have to wait 20 minutes.
Doing it like every.
I would. The more you pull that cable out in that card, the more margin for error.
I'm not pulling. I'm just stopping to look at
The more you do that, the more you're affecting every single time that you do that, the more margin for error, because copy and pasting, God forbid you delete something mid-catalog.
Thanks for chasing something.
I'm trying to make it easier for you. Think afterwards. Do it after, make it easy, do it one whole shot. That, again, this tethering is not hard. It's all the software, camera, software compatibilities. That's where the major issues are. I'd rather you guys, anytime something happens, it's usually fundamentally either us or a fundamental software issue. It's never this. I've never seen this fail. I've seen software create issues for us. So just find a solution for you. The actual air remote, I don't know where, up there, the air remote might be a solution for you because now it's backing up to another alternative.
I had a little weird thing happen. I was doing, because we're doing products that are exactly the same as far as color, temperature, and everything. And it said, you can shoot, capture same as last image. But it wasn't copying over all the extra things I put into it, like the toning, like only copy what the settings were.
So I'll show you exactly how you do that.
Only copying what the camera settings were, but not Lightroom settings.
So where are you importing what software are you using to see the data? That would be the first thing I'm asking. What software are you showing the client the data on?
In Lightroom.
Okay, so let's say I'm looking at Lightroom and you're tethering directly into Lightroom, okay? What you want to do is create a preset for what you're trying to focus on, okay? So as an example, say I'm tethering,
I was doing it as I was going. In other words, I would correct the image after shooting.
I'm going to show you how to do it while you're doing it for it to get fixed right off the bat. So let's go ahead and don't even think about those cameras. We're going to grab the Mark II, the 7D Mark II, and we're going to take this, pop this in here. So tethering, for me, color management is important. Making sure all the shots are toned and color correct. I can do that and create a preset for where I'm working. So I'm going to plug this in. Make sure my camera's on. File, tether capture, start. Before we move forward, I'm going to show you what I'm actually doing. So tether capture, I'm going to create that studio session, still referencing the file that we had before. Notice on the right-hand side here, it has develop settings. If I select there, I can select presets for what I have. So I can choose to shoot black and white, and every image that I take is in black and white. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take an image from here. Let's just go ahead and, I have no files I need on this card, so we're going to format it. Sorry, guys. Format. Perfect. I'm going to take this photo. Perfect. And let's say this is set to auto white balance. I can see everything that's in there. We look at the image. This is what we have here. But I want this, the white balance is slightly off, so let's go ahead and change it slightly to look more realistic. Every screen is going to look slightly different, but I want this to be what I'm doing for every single shot, and I don't want to have to do that every single time. Right on the left-hand side here, you have presets. You press plus. These are the options that you can choose to drag over to other solutions. And let's close this out. Let's move this over so it's not overlaid over what we're doing. So plus, white balance, basic control, tone, curve, clarity, everything that's saved onto that image, I can create a preset for. So we're going to say tether, tools, preset. Press create. So white balance is part of those. I want the white balance for every single shot that I had. So create, develop settings, go down to user presets, go to tether tools. Let's see if we can find it. Where are you? I did, sorry. Thank you for reminding me. Tether tools, preset. Okay, at this point, if I take another photograph, it's going to have that preset on there. So 1, 2, 3, and perfect. Lightroom processed that whole thing for me and created the whole preset automatically between those two shots.
So you have the roadmap to copy the previous image, but you can say save as previous image.
Capture One does that really well. Lightroom has software compatibility issues some days.
Drive me crazy. Besides, like, it said save as a previous image, but it didn't.
This is a way that it's happened. This is so much more. I'm giving you the functions of how I've been able to avoid, why isn't this working? I've been there. This is the way that I make sure everything happens. And it's a fundamental, it's a software issue many times. Again, this is just me trying to create a redundant system for myself not to have to think about it. So again, if I want my client, let's say it's a vibrant red dress, what we do is we color correct everything. I get my color checker, we shoot the color checker. I make sure that all those things are set for the first shot, create a preset for that, take the next shot, and I'm done. From that point forward, everything is fluid because of this. So, yes.
Can you do that same procedure process in Capture One?
Capture One is better at Lightroom than that, and if you change these settings, it'll automatically go to the next shot without having to select everything. Software issues are between each, they all have their issues. Capture One's really good at making sure that happens for the next shot. So like if right now I take this camera, as an example, you saw what I had to do to Lightroom to take this shot, okay? Watch this. I'm gonna close it, and this is, I love Lightroom. I've always used Lightroom, but I'm gonna show you a fundamental flaw between the two of them. If I quit Lightroom, how many steps did it take me to start tethering? I have to go to the option to go do that, right? So let's look at this one. I'm gonna take this out. I'm gonna open up Capture One. When it decides to open. And this is Capture One. I find that the program itself is more computer intensive than any other platform I use. Lightroom's really, really easy on your computer. This takes up a ton of RAM as it's processing. So these are things to consider. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna plug this in here. This is on. I should be able to get to a point where I do this. Attach camera, this camera cannot be attached. It knows that there's a camera associated with it. It doesn't tell me what's happening here, but it knows that there's a camera associated with it. So it already knew that I took a photo with a camera that's associated with it, and I didn't have to go anywhere. So now I reset this, make sure it's not on my end. Let's do this again. I didn't have to press anything. How awesome is that?
Now, in terms of what you did on Lightroom, color correction,
Watch this. Just to prove that point, enable black and white. That's the next photo, it's black and white. I don't have to create any presets. I don't have to do anything. It's a little bright. Let's go ahead and lower the exposure some. Next shot.
The settings up and keep
so
going.
once you
That's
make
it.
the adjustments, all subsequent shots, all right, that's it.
But this is more computer intensive. So if you're trying to run other things at the same time, this whole system takes a lot of memory, and it has, so the more this is processing, the more things it has to do, probability for error. Because this will close at some point from how many different shots. So if I'm one of those people that's like click, 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 this is going to take forever to process, and because it's so computer intensive, and it like pushes the computer's capability, it has a margin for error because it can crash at any given point. Things I'm thinking about when I'm choosing something. If I'm working slow, this is a good alternative to using Lightroom if you want to use this. As a Sony user, you get this as part of the platform because this little camera will automatically go to this software. It's not going to do that with Lightroom until today. It could change in the future, but until today, it doesn't have a native way of going there. But again, you saw the differences between the two systems, but now you have to learn a whole different workflow. Now you have to learn a whole different platform. The reason that this looks familiar is because I have this set to migration, so it looks like Lightroom. Because normally, my workspace looks completely different than everything else I've ever seen, and this is a whole new process. But because I have it looking like Lightroom, it looks like Lightroom, and therefore it looks less scary. But ultimately, it's software, you know. And I close this out. I know that if I reopen it, those images will still be there. Those are things to consider. But again, if anything happens in too many files process and it crashes, it's a software issue, never a hardware issue. So if you're having issues, and the reason I asked them in the beginning of the class, if you're having tethering problems, a lot of it either has to do with you, connection areas. Most of the time it's software. Something's happening with the software that it's not recognizing the camera. This is a tool to make your job easier. The software is what's making it difficult. So just figure out, as you're processing stuff, what's the easiest thing that's going to make you get your job done? Where is that process going? When we talk about color management as an example, you look along the whole process to figure out where the issues are. Is it correct? Is it tethered in? Got it. Can I see this in the back of the camera? Got it. Is there faulty connection because this popped out or something happened? No. Okay, this is in there. We're good. I know it's a software issue. Close out the software, open it up again, and I'm good to go. It's not difficult if you know what you're doing and how to process. I don't want you guys creating servers. I don't want you guys creating anything. I want you guys to create art. That's the whole point of this. You want to create images, you want to make your client happy, find the easiest way to do that.
You look to transfer from the iPad, iPhone back into another drive. How do you do that?
I personally don't use the wireless system personally. For me, for my workflow, I think I had mentioned that earlier. If I were to do it out of just me, I would probably go back and just import everything from the camera, but I'm sure there's a way to take that information and go back to the drive, and that's something Lauren will kind of discuss with you. I just don't use that system. I would prefer, for me, a wired system for my workflow. That's just who I am. Like I said before, for me, I lose stuff all the time. Anybody who's been here has seen me leave stuff places. I want the least amount of things possible. Your workflow might be completely different, and that's okay. That's the cool part about being a photographer, is like you have choices and options. But ultimately, it's not, the product's awesome. The software is what you have to fundamentally figure out what works for you and your workflow and your team and the rest of it. It'll help. So any other questions from there? No? Yes? I thought you had a question. Are we done? I just want to make, he's on live, so he's recording live, and I just wanted to make sure there were any questions that we had there. Any questions on product, wire, yes?
Well, not so much a question, but you were talking about Capture One.
Yeah.
What we shooting with the A9, no issue whatsoever, 26%. It was processing everything.
That's what you need, but you need a good computer. My old 2014 isn't going to be the fastest solution for that, right? Other things that you're considering, which is a fundamental, like, now hardware issue, but it's not the, this is the best thing, honestly, for my sanity, is my point. That's the whole process of this. You see how I do things, and I become very spastic when things don't go right. This has been my sanity and my Tylenol for the last 5 years. So any questions that you guys have regarding these things, please let me know. Lauren's here. Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi.
Do you want this? Yeah, we'll do this. Here.
Sure. So a couple quick questions. How do you manage your workflow if you are shooting wireless? If you're shooting wireless, you can go directly into any Mac or PC device. So you'd be going into the Case Remote software application on your device.
So you can go right to an external drive attached to your Mac, or you can go right into the Mac.
Yes, you would go into Case Remote application, and then you would set up a watch folder. So Lightroom could be watching it and filing the images exactly the way Jeff set
So
up
you'd
the
still be
folder.
seeing them on the iPad or phone, but they'd be going right into a drive.
You can go one-to-one. So if you're connected from the Case Air Wireless to a Mac or a PC, that's the one device you can see them on currently. What you could do if you're going into a Mac is use Apple Air Display, and then you can see this, right, you can do a mirror from one screen to the other with other devices.
That would make more sense.
Correct. Another thing to note on the Case Air Wireless, wireless transmission of large files is still limited by wireless transmission of large files. If you want to send raw images, your best option is always to use a cable. If you want to save the raw images to your card, you can shoot RAW plus JPEG and transfer only the JPEGs to whatever device you're looking at for preview purposes. You still are always saving the raw images to your card. You would then just upload those raw images when you're done with your shoot. The preview benefits of wireless are great. The other cool thing about wireless is you do have a lot of camera control. You can actually mount your camera remotely, trigger from your iPad, phone, or computer, and manage your workflow that way. You can change your settings, you can tap to focus, you can do a lot of really cool things with Case Air Wireless that you can't necessarily do with a cable, and certainly not with an iPad. You can't cable into an iPad in any way, so this gives you that functionality. But beyond your built-in wireless, the main differences are that you've got a longer span, the 150 foot, because the receiver, the wireless transmitter is external, so it's giving you a much wider range than an internal camera, and the application gives you more functionality. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Yep. You and I was talking about this before. As I said, I'm learning digital from the ground up. Okay, so what software would you recommend for a beginner?
Sure. The question was, if you're a beginner and you're new to tethering, what software would you recommend? There are a couple of really great options. Your Canon, for Canon shooters, Canon EOS Utility comes with your camera. If you're a Nikon Nikon shooter, there's Nikon Camera Control Pro. If you already are part of the Adobe photography suite, it comes with Lightroom and Photoshop. That's a great place to start. Lightroom is a very easy tethering software to get set up and started with the basic functionality of click, transfer, view. So those are 3 softwares that you could use that are great. There's also a free software called Sofer Build. And as Jeff mentioned, all of the newer Sony cameras actually do come with a free download trial of Sony's Capture One's Sony Express trial. So those are all good options to get started with.
And most of the software platforms will have some sort of free trial. It's not like you have to buy into it prior to trying. So definitely download the free trial with everything and see if it's free.
But I use Nikon cameras, so can you put that Nikon software?
Sure, it's Nikon Camera Control Pro. It is not a free software. You do have to purchase the Nikon version. So you could do a free download of that or a free download of Lightroom or Capture One to get started as well. Sure. Another question was in regards to Smart Shooter. Smart Shooter is a really interesting software. One of the questions that was discussed in the dialogue today was about the fact that Nikon bypasses the card and goes directly to the computer. Smart Shooter has actually developed a way to save images to your card using Nikon and also transfer the images to your computer. So that would be a great solution for those of you who are worried about not getting that image directly on your card. It's called Smart Shooter.
You can also buy a new camera, which also works.
Yeah, lots of different options. There's about 24 different tethering softwares on the market these days for the different types of functionality you want to do. There's a really great tool Jeff mentioned at the beginning of the presentation on our website. You go into search by camera. If you go to the top of the website, search by camera, you can put in your camera make and model, and it will tell you the right cable for your camera, it will tell you the right software for your camera, and it'll give you the links to all the different pieces that you need. Any other specific questions? Thank you very much, Jeff, for the presentation, and thank you all very much for coming. We'll be around for a little while for those of you in the live audience. For those of you